Some towns have secrets. Grimveil is a secret. And at Evergreen Chapel, where the dead come to rest is a relative term. My name is Rhys Croft. I came here chasing Entropy, the universe's slow slide into chaos. Instead, I found a place where decay isn't just a concept. It's a physical force, and the night shift comes with 3 strange rules to survive its pull. What's the most unsettling feeling you've ever experienced in a quiet place? Tell me in the comments below. And if you dare to face the gravity of decay with me, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and hit that notification bell. Because in Grimveil, the silence, it's full of noise. Prepare to listen. It wasn't the smell of lilies, or even the faint chemical tang of formalin. The smell at Evergreen Chapel was older, deeper, the scent of decay. Yes, but mixed with something metallic, like rusted iron being slowly ground into dust, and the dry, woody aroma of something vital being leached away. And on my first night here, when the streetlights outside Grimveil seemed to dim, and the old building settled around me, I heard it. Not a sound, not really, but a low, resonant hum. A vibration felt deep in the bone, like the very ground beneath me was unraveling. My name is Rhys Croft. I'm a physicist. Or I was before the grant funding dried up and the academic world decided that focusing on the implications of entropy at the quantum level was a bit too theoretical. My research isn't about death, not in the biological sense. It's about decay, about disorder, about the universe's slow, inevitable slide towards absolute thermodynamic equilibrium. I see entropy everywhere. In a crumbling building, in a fading photograph, in the way even the most intricate structures eventually give way to chaos. It's a concept that fascinates and terrifies me in equal measure. I needed a place that was quiet, isolated, where I could work on my equations, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to understand, or even counteract, that inexorable pull. Evergreen Chapel, a funeral home in a town whose very name suggested gloom, offered exactly that. A graveyard shift, minimal interaction, a place steeped in the ultimate manifestation of decay. My new colleague, and the only other soul on the night shift, was Jasper Thorne. He was young, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He wasn't what I expected from a mortuary assistant. He had the air of a meticulous scientist, or perhaps a watchmaker, precise and observant. He spoke with a quiet intensity, his focus unwavering. He was the one who gave me the rules, not with the solemnity of someone sharing dark secrets, but with the detached curiosity of someone listing variables in an experiment. The night shift here is simple, Rhys, he'd said, showing me around the silent, polished halls. Maintenance, receiving, and a few protocols, not from the owner. The location itself, Grimveil, has certain properties. He gestured to a dark mahogany coffin on display. Observe, don't interfere, and you'll be fine. I just nodded, my mind already analyzing the air pressure, the temperature fluctuations. First, Jasper said, his voice low, don't polish the coffins at night, especially the older ones. They hum back. My brow furrowed. Hum back, like resonant frequencies. Jasper's eyes gained a spark of interest. Perhaps, or something else. A low vibration, a sort of sympathetic decay. It accelerates the process, unpredictably. Second, he continued, moving towards the small viewing room, where a leather-bound guest book rested on a podium. If the guest book signs itself, and it will sometimes, don't read the names. Don't look at them. Just close the book. Why? What happens if you read them? The resonance deepens, Jasper said, his gaze distant, as if observing a process happening far away. You acknowledge the signature. It acknowledges yours, a form of entanglement, unwanted entanglement. unwanted. And third, he led me into the preparation room, its sterile steel surfaces gleaming under the fluorescent lights. A single empty gurney sat in the center. When the corpses blink, and they will sometimes, especially just after arrival, don't look at their eyes. Don't make eye contact. Turn away. They're choosing you. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine, a reaction that annoyed my logical mind. Choosing me? For what? Jasper smiled, a thin, unsettling expression that didn't reach his eyes. To join the chorus, to be drawn into the current. Grimveil's current? He handed me a set of keys, heavy and cold in my hand. The owner will be here in the morning. Follow the rules, Rhys. They aren't superstition. They are applied physics of a very peculiar kind. He left, his footsteps echoing down the silent hall. I was alone, surrounded by polished wood, hushed rooms, and the faint, vibrating hum that seemed to resonate from the very ground. Grimveil, the gravity of decay. Applied physics. My scientific curiosity warred with a rising tide of primal unease. The darkness outside pressed in, thick and absolute. And somewhere, in one of the silent rooms, a guest book waited, and a coffin might be starting to hum. The night settled into a strange, unsettling routine. The silence of Evergreen Chapel was not empty, but filled with subtle, unnatural sounds. The soft creak of wood that sounded like joints giving way, the whisper of air that carried no draft, and that low, vibrating hum that seemed to originate not from any source, but from the very fabric of the building, deepening and receding like a tide. The smell of decay, of rusting metal and rotting wood, became more pronounced at irregular intervals. My research on entropy felt less like a purely academic pursuit, and more like an urgent personal defense against this palpable sense of universal unraveling. Jasper Thorne was a constant, unnerving presence. He moved through the chapel with a detached grace, meticulously performing his duties, receiving and preparing bodies with a professionalism that bordered on the clinical, maintaining the facilities, all while making precise, almost furtive notes in a small, leather-bound journal. He didn't seem bothered by the strangeness. He observed it, measured it, jotted down readings from various small, complex devices he sometimes carried. He was studying the decay, not fearing it. The first rule was activated during my third week. A shipment of new coffins had arrived the previous day. Beautiful, expensive things made of polished oak and gleaming brass. Mr. Davison, the daytime owner, a man who preferred to ignore anything that couldn't be accounted for on a ledger, had left strict instructions. Make sure those new coffins are gleaming by morning, Rhys. First impressions matter. Against my better judgment, with Jasper watching silently from the doorway of the preparation room, I began polishing one of the oak coffins around midnight. The wood felt smooth, cool under my cloth. As I worked, I felt it, a low vibration starting in the wood itself, transferring through my hand, up my arm, settling deep in my chest. Then came the sound. Not a sound heard with the ears, but felt through the bones. A low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the entire coffin. It was a mournful sound, deep and rich, like a distant, resonant chord being held indefinitely. And as it hummed, I could swear the polished surface of the oak seemed to dull slightly. The grain looking older, more tired. The brass fittings felt colder, harder to polish, as if resisting my touch. I stopped polishing. My hand froze. The humming slowly faded, leaving a ringing silence in my ears. Jasper stepped into the bay, his eyes fixed on the coffin, then on me. Sympathetic resonance, he murmured, more to himself than me. The polishing, it agitates the structure. The structure responds, releasing stored entropy. He made a note in his journal, his pencil scratching softly. Notice the dulling. Approximately 1.7% accelerated decay rate over 3 minutes of contact. I stared at him. Accelerated decay? You mean this place? It actually makes things fall apart faster? The gravity of decay, Rhys. Jasper said, an unsettling smile touching his lips. Grimveil's special property. It has a natural tendency towards increasing disorder. And certain activities, certain materials, they resonate with that tendency. Like tuning a string, he glanced at the silent, inert coffin. Best leave it for the daylight crew. The sun's frequency is less compatible. He turned and went back to his work, leaving me alone with the silent humming wood. Officer Elara Vance made one of her routine checks that night. She was a no-nonsense woman. Her uniform crisp, her gaze sharp and assessing. She didn't seem like the type to entertain ghost stories. She asked the usual questions about security, about any disturbances. I hesitated, then decided against mentioning the humming coffin. How would I even explain it? Accelerated decay. She'd think I was as strange as the town itself. Quiet night then? She asked, finishing her coffee from the machine in the lobby. Just the usual. Quiet? I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Aye, she nodded, her eyes sweeping the silent lobby, lingering for a moment on the closed doors of the viewing rooms. Grimveil has a way of getting into your bones, she said, her voice softer than before. Most folks who come here, they either leave fast or they stay. And the ones who stay, they change. She gave me a long, appraising look before stepping back out into the night. That night, in my cramped, silent room above the garage, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not by eyes, but by a kind of patient, physical presence. A silent, heavy weight pressing down. A palpable force of decay. I felt my own body, my own mind, struggling against it, fighting the inevitable slide into disorder. Grimveil wasn't just a town. It was a field of force, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The gravity of decay was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The low hum was almost constant now, a subtle vibration beneath the floorboards, within the walls. A physical manifestation of the town's peculiar property. I started noticing small things everywhere. A faint rust-like dust appearing on polished metal surfaces overnight. Flowers wilting at an alarming rate. The colors in old photographs in the office appearing faded, almost monochrome from one shift to the next. The air itself sometimes felt heavy, stagnant, as if resisting movement. My physics background offered no comfort. These phenomena defied the known laws of thermodynamics. Decay was a process, yes, but it wasn't a palpable force, a field of influence that could be felt and almost heard. It wasn't sentient, was it? The guest book in the main viewing room became another source of dread. It was a large, ornate volume, its pages thick and creamy, intended for visitors to sign their condolences. But at night, sometimes, I would find it open to a fresh page and watch, horrified, as the pen resting beside it would slowly, deliberately begin to scrawl names onto the blank paper. The pen moved on its own, guided by an unseen hand, the ink flowing as if from an unseen source. It was the most overt, undeniable evidence of something profoundly wrong at Evergreen Chapel. The second rule loomed large. If the guest book signs itself, don't read the names. One night, drawn by a morbid curiosity that felt like a physical pull, I found the book open, fresh names appearing in a shaky, looping script. I fought the urge to look, to read them. My eyes were drawn to the page, wanting to decipher the names, to understand who or what was writing them. The low hum intensified, becoming a chorus of subtle vibrations, each seemingly tied to a name on the page. It felt like they were calling to me, wanting me to acknowledge them, to see them. It was the Stillness Choir Jasper had mentioned. Not voices, but resonances, signatures, calling out through the medium of the book. "Don't read the names," Jasper's voice, calm and clinical, echoed in my mind. Reading them would be acknowledging the entanglement, joining the network. I slammed the book shut, the sound echoing jarringly in the silent room. The vibrations lessened, the unseen pen clattered to the podium, but the image of the freshly scrawled names lingered in my mind, and that feeling of a hidden network, a chorus of stillness remained. Later that week, I encountered Cyrus Blackwood. He wasn't a conventional employee, but the old groundskeeper for the cemetery attached to the chapel. A man as weathered and stoic as the granite headstones he tended. He was a man of few words, his face lined like a roadmap of sorrow, his eyes holding a deep, weary sadness. He often worked late, even into the night, his shovel scraping against the hard Grimveil earth. He saw me staring at the freshly signed guest book one morning, before the daytime staff arrived. He paused, leaning on his shovel, the smell of damp earth and something else, something cold and metallic, clinging to him. "Some names," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Ain't meant for the light of day, son. And some signatures, they ain't finished yet." He looked towards the rows of headstones, then back at the chapel. "Ground here. It holds on to things, doesn't like to let go. Doesn't like folks stirring things up." He didn't elaborate, just gave me a long, searching look before turning back to his work. He was a man who understood the gravity of decay, not as a physicist, but as someone who had spent his life burying things that refused to stay buried. He knew, and his quiet acceptance was almost more terrifying than the phenomena themselves. That night, in the guest book, I saw a name I recognized, written faintly in the middle of the page, almost obscured by other names. It was the name of the relative whose tragic death had sent me down this path, whose face I still saw whenever I closed my eyes. The Stillness Choir was calling to me directly now, and the gravity of decay felt like it was beginning to pull me under. The line between observing Grimveil's peculiar physics and being actively affected by them was dissolving. The low hum of decay was now a constant presence, a pressure in my skull, a vibration in my bones that made my teeth ache. My insomnia was complete. I no longer slept. My equations offered no solace. They were elegant descriptors of a universe I thought I understood. But Grimveil was a brutal contradiction, a place where entropy had its own agenda. A place where entropy had its own agenda. Yes, but Thorne's reaction to my escalating distress was fascinating. He watched me with an almost clinical detachment, noting my trembling hands, the dark circles under my eyes, my increasing jumpiness. He made more notes in his journal, scribbling furiously, occasionally muttering about resonant frequencies and observer bias. He wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to measure my breakdown to see how I, a physicist obsessed with decay, would react when faced with its palpable personal manifestation. His scientific curiosity had morphed into something cold, obsessive, dangerous. He was no longer just studying the gravity of decay. He was working with it, testing its limits, pushing its boundaries. The Thesis themselves became the most visceral manifestation of the gravity of decay's pull. They were still quiet, treated with dignity and respect, awaiting their final rest. But at night, sometimes in the silent, refrigerated preparation room, or in a closed coffin in a viewing room, I would see them. Subtle movements, a finger twitching, a head tilting almost imperceptibly, and the eyes would blink. This was the third rule, the most terrifying. When the corpses blink, don't look. They're choosing you. One night, while conducting a routine check, I stood before a closed coffin, verifying the nameplate. Suddenly, from within the silent box, I heard a soft, almost inaudible click. A heartbeat later, the coffin lid creaked open an inch, and through the gap I saw an eye. Just one. Cloudy, lifeless, but open. staring directly at me from the shadowed interior. It blinked slowly, deliberately, and I felt it. A tug, a pull. Not just physical, but something that resonated deep within my very being. A gravitational force drawing me towards it, towards the stillness, the cold, the inevitable decay it represented. It was the most terrifying, most profound invitation I had ever received. The gravity of decay was choosing me, using the corpse as its conduit, its spokesperson. Don't look. They're choosing you. Jasper's voice, calm, almost encouraging, echoed in my head. Looking would be accepting the invitation, letting myself be pulled. I fought the urge with every fiber of my being. My muscles tensed, my jaw clenched. The pull was like a physical current, strong and insistent, trying to drag me forward. My vision swam. The hum of decay intensified, becoming a chorus of low, resonant vibrations. A silent song of entropy sung by the chosen. I could almost hear my own name being added to that dreadful harmony. With a desperate effort, I wrenched my gaze away, turning my back on the partially open coffin, on the single staring eye within. The pull lessened, slowly, reluctantly, but it didn't disappear. It merely shifted. When I turned back, the coffin lid was closed again, silent and inert, but the air around it felt colder, and the hum it radiated was subtly different. Lower, more resonant. Later, Officer Elara Vance arrived for her check. She found me sitting on the floor in the hallway, shaking, covered in a cold sweat. She didn't ask many questions this time. Her eyes, sharp and observant, swept over the silent chapel, lingering for a moment near the viewing room with the closed coffin. She felt a shift in the atmosphere. "Rhys," she said, her voice quiet, devoid of her usual brisk authority. "There are things happening in Grimveil, things I can't explain, things my training, it doesn't prepare me for." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. I looked into those old town records. The history of this land. It's complicated. There are stories, legends, about the ground here, about how it holds onto things, doesn't like leaving. Her hoarseness suggested she was beginning to believe in the impossible. Jasper Thorne saw me talking to Officer Vance. His gaze, previously filled with scientific curiosity, now held a flicker of irritation, almost anger. He didn't like unforeseen variables. He didn't like anything that might interfere with his observations. His experiments with the gravity of decay, the blinking corpses, the calling names, the humming coffins, they weren't just phenomena to him anymore. They were tools. And I was rapidly becoming the most interesting, most promising tool in his terrible collection. The gravity of decay was pulling me in, and Jasper Thorne was holding the strings. The hum of decay reached a fever pitch. It was no longer a vibration in the bones. It was a physical force, distorting the air, making the walls seem to breathe, the floor subtly buckle. The scent of decay, of rust and rot, was suffocating. Grimveil's peculiar physics, the gravity of decay, was no longer a subtle influence. It was a roaring torrent of entropy. I stumbled through the chapel, flashlight beam dancing wildly, illuminating a scene of accelerating disarray. The new oak coffins from weeks ago looked like they'd spent centuries buried, their polished surfaces dull, their wood grayed and splintered. Metal fixtures were covered in thick red rust, crumbling at a touch. The colors in the framed pictures on the walls had leached away, leaving only faded, ghostly outlines. The guest book on the podium was a blur of names, appearing and decaying on the page in a horrifying, endless loop. The unseen pen scrawling with frantic speed. The air was thick with a chorus of resonant vibrations. The Stillness Choir, a deafening hum that spoke of finality, of acceptance of being chosen. My mind was a chaotic storm, my scientific training warring desperately with the undeniable, terrifying reality unfolding around me. This wasn't just accelerated decay. This was directed entropy, a physical force with intent, and its intent felt singularly focused on me. The pull I'd felt from the blinking corpses was now everywhere. A relentless gravitational force trying to drag me down, to make me Chung-Shun, to join the state of absolute decay. Jasper Thorne appeared at the entrance to the preparation room, his figure silhouetted against the sickly fluorescent lights that flickered violently, resisting the encroaching disorder. His face, previously a mask of scientific detachment, was alight with a terrifying, almost divine fervor. He held a complex device, a mass of humming copper coils and glowing vacuum tubes, its energy reading spiking wildly on a small digital display. "Magnificent, Rhys," he practically shouted over the din, his voice resonant with excitement. "The confluence is perfect. The gravity of decay is at its zenith. All variables are converging." "Jasper, what are you doing?" I choked out, fighting the pull that was trying to bring me to my knees. "Doing? I am redefining existence," he declared, advancing into the room, the device humming louder. "Entropy is not just a process, Rhys. It's a force, a fundamental property of the universe, strongest here in Grimveil. I've learned how to measure it, to predict its fluctuations, and now I'm learning to control it." He gestured around the room, at the rapidly decaying materials, the vibrating air. "This is my lab, Evergreen Chapel, a place where the barriers between ordered existence and total chaos are thinnest." He stopped before a gurney, where a fresh they, one that had arrived just hours before, lay covered by a sheet. The sheet rippled slightly. "The corpses," Jasper continued, his eyes blazing. "They are the perfect conduits. They are already halfway there. And the moments of transition, the blinking, the choosing, they are peaks, spikes of pure directed entropic force. And you, Rhys." He turned the full intensity of his gaze on me, and I felt the pull redouble, centering on a specific point within me. A cold, aching void of fear. A cold, aching void of fear. Your obsession with entropy, your fear of decay, it makes you resonate with the gravity. You are not just an observer. You are a receiver, an amplifier. You are the variable I needed to initiate the final phase. He raised the device. "I will not just observe decay, Rhys. I will master it, control it, reverse it. Imagine perfect order, eternal preservation. Grimveil is the key, and you are the final lock." He moved towards the gurney. "This one." He tapped the sheet covering the Tida, died resisting, full of energy, the perfect catalyst. "I just need you to anchor the process, focus the gravity." The under the sheet shifted. A hand, pale and still, slid out from beneath the fabric, fingers twitching. Then, a sudden, sharp sound. A blink. The sheet lifted slightly, revealing an eye, open, milky white, looking at me. Not just looking, pulling. The gravity was converging on this one point, using the corpse as its anchor, and me as its target. "Don't look. They're choosing you." The rule wasn't just a warning. It was a command to resist the pull. "Look at it, Rhys," Jasper urged, his voice a feverish whisper. "Look into its eyes. Let the gravity connect. Let the process initiate. Your fear, your struggle, it's fuel. It's fuel." I fought the pull, fought the urge to look, my scientific mind screaming in defiance of this twisted parody of physics. Entropy wasn't meant to be controlled. Decay wasn't meant to choose, but the force was overwhelming, dragging me forward, my feet scraping on the floor. Suddenly, the front door of the chapel burst open, letting in a gust of ordinary, non-decaying air. Officer Alara Vance stood there, her uniform wet, her face grim. She'd followed her hunch. "Thorne, stop this. What in God's name is going on?" she yelled, gun drawn. Jasper, startled, turned his device towards her. Another variable, disrupting the field. The gravity of decay surged outwards, affecting the newcomer. Officer Vance cried out, her gun arm drooping, her body slumping slightly, as if she'd aged decades in an instant. Her uniform seemed to gray, her skin sag, the very air around her warped. Then, a low, resonant voice from the doorway behind her. Cyrus Blackwood. He held a rusted ancient shovel, its wood handle looking dangerously fragile. "Grimveil doesn't like being forced, boy," he rumbled, advancing. "Some things ain't meant for your equations." The conflict erupted. Jasper, obsessed with maintaining the field, aimed his device at Vance and Blackwood, trying to use the gravity against them. The Stillness Choir's hum intensified, focusing its pull on anyone who wasn't succumbing to it. The mannequins in the viewing room next door began to creak and shift, their expressions of decay deepening. The blinking corpse on the gurney's eye remained fixed on me, pulling, a silent, horrifying invitation. My physics, my understanding of resistance, of counterforce, it wasn't about external force. It was about internal state. Entropy increased in a closed system. Disorder spread where there was no resistance. But what if the resistance wasn't physical? What if it was conceptual? What if it was order? My research, my equations, they were all about imposing order on chaos, with a desperate burst of energy, ignoring the pull, ignoring the chaos. I focused my mind on my equations, on the fundamental principles of stability, of structure, of anti-entropy. I began to recite them aloud, not whispering, but speaking with the clarity and focus of a lecture. Not equations of decay, but equations of conservation, of form, of being. The effect was unexpected. The gravity of decay, the Stillness Choir's hum, seemed to recoil from my words, from the imposition of order. The resonance wavered. The blinking corpse's eye seemed to flicker, the pull lessening. Jasper stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you doing? You're disrupting the field. You're creating coherence. I'm fighting entropy, Jasper," I yelled, my voice gaining strength. "With order, with definition. This place isn't about chaos. It's about a perversion of physics. It's about a perversion of physics. And physics has rules." I grabbed a heavy metal embalming tray and with a roar hurled it at Jasper's device. It struck the humming coils with a clang, sparking violently. The device shrieked, sputtering, its glow dying. "Jasper!" cried out in frustration. The Stillness Choir's hum faltered, then broke into a chaotic, discordant cacophony before collapsing into silence. The intense pull from the blinking corpse vanished. The rapid decay in the room paused, but the gravity of decay was still Grimveil's property, and it was angry. It turned its silent entropic force directly on Jasper, the one who had tried to harness it, to control it. Jasper stumbled back, his body twisting, his skin shimmering, aging decades in seconds. He let out a soundless gasp, his form seeming to collapse inward, like a structure whose load-bearing walls had suddenly vanished, with a soft rustling sound, like paper turning to dust. He was gone. Nothing remained but a faint metallic residue on the floor, and the lingering smell of ozone. The terrifying force receded. The aggressive decay slowed to Grimveil's usual, unnerving rate. The blinking corpse's eye closed. Officer Vance, leaning against a wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps, stared at the empty space where Jasper had stood. Cyrus Blackwood lowered his shovel, his ancient face etched with grim understanding. We had survived, but the gravity of decay was still here, and it knew our names now. The silence after Jasper Thorne's horrifying disappearance was a fragile, uncertain thing. It wasn't the absolute vacuum left by the chrome leash, but a relative stillness, a pause in the roaring current of entropy that had just threatened to consume us. The rapid decay subsided, leaving the house with the permanent, unsettling patina of extreme age, but no longer actively crumbling around us. The oppressive hum of the Stillness Choir had dissipated, replaced by the natural sounds of the old building groaning in the quiet night, amplified by our heightened senses. Officer Laravance pushed herself away from the wall, her body trembling, her face pale and drawn. The temporary aging seemed to recede, but the shock in her eyes remained. My God," she whispered, her voice raw. What was that?" Cyrus Blackwood, the old groundskeeper, walked slowly towards the spot where Jasper had vanished. He knelt, running a calloused hand through the faint, metallic dust that remained. "Ground on like being rushed," he rumbled, his voice low. "Don't like being told what to do." Boy tried to make it dance to his tune. It just took him back. He looked at me. "You didn't let it pull you under, son. Used them numbers in your head, my equations, my focus on order. It had been a counter frequency, a shield against the chaos. Not magic, but perhaps a different kind of physics, a different kind of resistance." We stood there, the three of us, in the silent, damaged preparation room, surrounded by inert corpses and the lingering scent of decay, knowing a truth that no police report, no scientific paper, would ever be able to contain. Officer Vance, regaining some of her composure, took out her radio. "Vance to dispatch. Situation at Evergreen Chapel. Shots fired. 1 casualty. Apparent accident. Chemical exposure. Possible structural collapse." She paused, her voice tight. "Need backup. And the coroner. It's complicated." She was already filtering the truth, shaping it into something the system could process. As she spoke into the radio, Cyrus Blackwood walked over to the guest book in the viewing room. He looked at the page, at the names that had appeared and decayed. Then, with a heavy sigh, he closed the book. "Some stories," he murmured, "best stay shut." I looked at the ether on the gurney, the one whose eye had blinked, whose pull had been strongest. It was still lifeless, but as I watched, I could swear I saw a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer around it. A subtle distortion in the air, like heat haze on a hot day but cold. The Gravity of Decay was still Grimveil's property, and it was still working, just at its own pace again. My sister, Marla, arrived at the funeral home shortly after the first police cruisers, drawn by Officer Vance's call to contact family members of employees. She rushed to me, her face a mixture of fear and relief. When she saw the state of the funeral home, saw the empty suit, the wild look in my eyes, she didn't need many explanations. She just held me tight, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold stillness of the chapel. She looked at Officer Vance and Cyrus with bewildered gratitude, knowing they had helped, but not truly understanding what they had saved me from. The investigation into Jasper Thorne's disappearance was brief and inconclusive. The official finding was death by accidental chemical exposure, perhaps combined with structural failure during the perceived tremors. His research materials were deemed the eccentric ramblings of a disturbed individual. Evergreen Chapel was closed indefinitely, deemed unsafe. Grimveil's secrets remained Grimveil's own. As Marla drove me away from the chapel, from the silent town of Grimveil, in the harsh light of day, I looked back at the old building, standing dark and brooding against the clear sky. It looked like any other dilapidated funeral home in any other small, forgotten town. But I knew the truth. And the gravity of decay. It had left its mark on me. Life after Grimveil was a study in contradictions. I was safe, alive, away from the direct influence of the gravity of decay. but I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unfeel the hum, the pull, the terrifying understanding of entropy as a physical active force. My research, once a passion, was now an obsession, bordering on madness. I saw decay everywhere, not just as a process, but as a visible, tangible force. Paint peeling faster than it should, food spoiling with unnerving speed, the edges of buildings seeming to subtly soften and blur. My sister Marla tried her best to help me. She found me a therapist, encouraged me to talk. But how do you explain a force that makes corpses blink and builds accelerate their own decay? They diagnosed me with severe PTSD, exacerbated by my existing insomnia and, well, the traumatic environment of working in a funeral home. They gave me medication, but the nightmares persisted, filled with the feeling of being pulled, of hearing that silent, resonant hum in my bones. Officer Vance and I stayed in touch. She never spoke of the supernatural directly in our conversations, but her questions about Grimveil, about the history of the land, about any unusual artifacts Jasper might have been studying, revealed that she was quietly pursuing her own investigation, trying to find some rational framework for the impossible. She sent me news clippings about other strange occurrences in remote towns, things that resonated with a disturbing familiarity. Objects aging rapidly, localized fields of cold, unexplained disappearances. The gravity of decay, or forces like it, were not confined to Grimveil. Cyrus Blackwood remained in Grimveil, the silent guardian of its graveyard and its secrets. He sent me a small, unmarked package once. Inside was a piece of petrified wood, incredibly dense and heavy for its size, wrapped in a cloth that smelled faintly of sage and damp earth. A note was tucked inside. Keep it close. Some things resist the pull. For a while, it was a tangible reminder that resistance was possible, however temporary. Jasper Thorne's research materials, seized by the authorities, were eventually declassified and labeled highly unusual fringe science. Through a contact I still maintained in the academic world, I managed to gain access to some of his more coherent notes. They were filled with his observations on Grimveil's entropic field, his attempts to quantify and manipulate it, his theories about consciousness and memory having their own gravitational pull on physical reality. He believed the Stillness Choir were the trapped signatures of particularly resonant individuals, their energies amplified by the field, and that the blinking was their attempt to reach out, to pull others into their state. His final entry, scrawled in a shaky hand, spoke of his final variable and the potential for a complete entropic inversion. He hadn't been trying to just study decay. He was trying to weaponize it, to turn the universe's own inevitable slide towards chaos into a tool for something. His theories were terrifyingly close to my own. I still work with old books, but now, I don't just see the history in the pages. I see the entropy, the slow, inevitable decay, and I see the resistance, the careful preservation, the enduring stories, the stubbornness of ink and paper to hold on to form against the universal pull towards disorder. Sometimes, when I'm examining a particularly old manuscript, I feel a faint vibration in the paper, a low hum that resonates in my bones. I look closely at the fading text, at the intricate illustrations, and I wonder if the stories themselves have their own kind of gravity, their own kind of pull. I wonder if some of them are still trying to choose someone to listen. The Grimveil undertaking was just a job, but Grimveil itself, it's a condition, an understanding, and the gravity of decay. It's not just a force of nature, it's a choice, and I know, with a chilling certainty that sleepless nights cannot erase, that even though I left Grimveil, it hasn't finished choosing its members for the Stillness Choir. And sometimes, when the world is quiet and the shadows deepen, I can still feel that subtle, insistent pull, drawing me back towards the silence, towards the decay, towards the inevitable state of just being chosen. The gravity of decay. It sinks its teeth into you, doesn't it? Rhys Croft thought he understood entropy, but Grimveil showed him the terrifying truth of a force with intent. Jasper Thorne is gone, but the stillness remains. And the choir, it's still singing. Seriously, if you didn't watch until the very end, you missed the crucial aftermath. The quiet horror that lingers long after the climax. The final moments reveal the true, lasting impact of Grimveil. Lasting impact of Grimveil. What do you think the Stillness Choir is? What does the Gravity of Decay want? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it through this shift at Evergreen Chapel, if the blinking hasn't chosen you, then join the Night Creepypasta Rules community. Subscribe, because Grimveil is always watching, and the pull is always there.